There is a moment in Season 5 of Game of Thrones where Jon Snow is lying in the snow outside Castle Black, bleeding from 6 stab wounds, staring up at a night sky that does not offer him anything. The men who put those wounds in him were his own brothers. Not enemies, not wildlings. Not the army of the dead that Jon had spent years warning everyone about and sacrificing everything to prepare for. His brothers, the men he led, the men he clothed and fed and marched and fought beside and buried when they fell, the men who called him Lord Commander and meant it. The last one to stab him was a boy named Olly, a boy Jon had taken in after a wildling raiding party destroyed his village. A boy Jon had trusted with his correspondence, his meals, the everyday logistics of running the Night's Watch. When Olly stepped forward in that circle of men, Jon said his name. Just his name, quietly, not as an accusation and not as a plea, but simply as a recognition, a naming of what he was seeing. Olly. And Olly drove the knife in one final time and walked away. The message that had lured Jon outside had one word on it: traitor. That is the sentence Game of Thrones is delivering on Jon Snow at that precise moment. Not punishment from an enemy, not the cost of a battle lost. Punishment delivered by the people he led, for doing exactly what he believed was right. He let the wildlings through the wall, because the alternative was leaving 100,000 potential whites north of it for the Night King. He did the math. He made the call, and his brothers killed him for it. That is the whole shape of Jon Snow's story. Every other thing in this video is the explanation of how that moment came to be, and what it cost, and what it produced. Jon Snow is the character the show uses to examine something it circles constantly, but rarely names directly. What happens to a good man in a world that has no particular use for goodness? Not a naive man, not a perfect one. A man who sees clearly, calculates carefully, understands the cost of his decisions, and makes them anyway because he has decided, at some foundational level, that the right thing is the right thing regardless of what it costs him personally. A man who has chosen honor so consistently that it has become his defining characteristic, even when honor is the most dangerous thing available to choose. Every time Jon Snow does the correct thing, the thing the narrative seems to be endorsing, it costs him something he cannot get back. His innocence, his woman, his vow, his life, his queen, his name. The show does not reward honor. It charges for it, at interest, and Jon Snow pays every invoice without complaint and without stopping. What makes him different from every other character the series martyrs is not the martyrdom itself, it is that he keeps coming back. He is killed and resurrected, and does not become cynical. He is betrayed and does not stop trusting. He is exiled at the end, sent away from everything, from the throne he could have claimed and the name that would have given him the world. And the walk north feels like both the saddest possible conclusion for a man who gave everything, and the only ending this particular man could arrive at and still be himself. Welcome to the long night. Get comfortable. This one goes deep. Let us get into it. Jon Snow does not begin the story as Jon Snow. The name Snow, the bastard surname given to all illegitimate children born in the north, the social fact that tells you exactly what someone is before they have said a word, is the first wound. It locates him in the world with precision. He is not a Stark. He cannot inherit. He cannot sit at the high table without the presence of Catelyn Stark, reminding the room of what his existence implies. He is the evidence of something Ned Stark did, an inconvenient biological fact that the household has been organized around managing without ever quite resolving. What Game of Thrones does so carefully in its introduction of Jon in Winter is Coming, which aired April 17, 2011, is establish the wound through specificity rather than through explanation. There is no scene where someone tells you what Jon's position is. Instead, you get the feast. King Robert Baratheon arrives at Winterfell, the most significant visitor in living memory, and Catelyn Stark sends Jon away from the high table. Not cruelly, not even with obvious malice, just with the quiet, practiced insistence of a woman who has made her decision about what Jon is, and for whom the arrival of royalty is not the occasion to revisit it. Jon picks up his cup and he goes. He finds a seat lower, with the servants and the lesser household members, and he does not argue. He does not look hurt, not in a way he allows to show. He just goes. Think about what that means. Jon Snow, who will eventually command armies, who will stare down the Night King himself across frozen water at Hardhome, who will kill a queen to protect a world. At the beginning of this story, he cannot sit at a table. Not because he lacks the ability or the worth, but because the social architecture of Winterfell has no place for him that does not remind everyone else of something uncomfortable. He has learned, through years of exactly this kind of daily calibration, that the correct response to being displaced is to absorb it quietly and move on. He has been absorbing it quietly for his entire conscious life. Catelyn Stark is complicated, and that complication is worth sitting with rather than rushing past. She is not a villain. She is a woman who was handed a husband's bastard child at the beginning of her marriage and asked to raise it alongside her own children, without explanation, for the rest of her life. Ned Stark never tells her the truth. He never tells her that Jon is not his son but his nephew, that Jon is the child of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, hidden in plain sight to protect him from Robert Baratheon's rage at discovering a Targaryen heir. So Catelyn spends her entire marriage believing that Ned betrayed her with another woman and then brought that woman's child home to live with her own. She cannot forgive Ned for it because she loves him. She cannot take it out on Ned because he is her husband and her lord, and the foundation of everything she has built. So it comes out in Jon, in the small, consistent coldness she maintains toward him, in the way she speaks about him in The King's Road, which aired April 24, 2011, telling Ned flat out that she cannot pretend to love the boy. In the way she frames Jon's presence at Winterfell as specifically a wound to her, rather than a domestic arrangement that simply is. She said once, in that episode, that she made a promise to herself when Jon was first brought home, to treat him as her own. She failed to keep it. She knows this. She names the failure. She cannot correct it. The result of growing up in a household where one of the two most important people looks at you and sees a betrayal, where your presence in a room is a reminder of something painful rather than something welcome, is not bitterness in Jon's case. It is not rebellion or defiance. What it produces is something more persistent and in its way more damaging, a permanent readiness to be sent away, a deep-down understanding that he is the person who gets moved when other people need the space, that he takes up room that could belong to someone with a better claim, that he is, at some cellular level, temporary in every room he occupies. This is not a visible quality in Jon Snow, the way Cersei's pride is visible, or Sansa's politeness is visible. It sits below the surface. You see it in how he moves through spaces, the specific way he makes himself smaller when he does not need to, the way he never quite expects to stay. You see it in his decision to join the Night's Watch, which is the first major choice the show asks him to make. Ned Stark loves Jon. This needs to be established clearly, because the complication of the Stark family's relationship with Jon runs the risk of obscuring it. The love is real and visible throughout Season 1. Ned teaches Jon. He spends time with Jon that he does not spend with Robb or Bran, time that is specifically and deliberately paternal, a father instructing a son in the things a man needs to know. He treats Jon in every way that matters, except the ways that matter most, and the ways that matter most he cannot address without telling the truth, which he cannot tell without endangering Jon's life. When Jon asks about his mother, before leaving for the Wall, in The King's Road, Ned says, "The next time we see each other, we will talk about your mother. I promise." He dies in Baelor, Season 1, Episode 9, which aired June 12, 2011. He is executed in the plaza outside the Great Sept of Baelor in King's Landing, while his daughters watch and the crowd roars. Jon is at Castle Black when it happens, hundreds of miles away, unable to reach him. The promise is never kept. Jon never learns the truth from his father. He learns it years later, in pieces, from a psychic child and a maester's archive, and by that point the man who could have simply sat him down and told him is long dead. What he eventually learns is that Ned Stark's silence, which felt like protection because it was protection, also kept Jon from understanding who he was and what he was owed. He grew up believing he had no legitimate name when he had the most important name in Westeros. He grew up believing he was expendable when in some sense the entire story of the wars that preceded his birth had been building toward him. He grew up believing the question of his mother was a wound Ned could not address, when the actual answer was that addressing it would have saved Jon but killed everything Ned was trying to protect. This is the foundational wound, not Catelyn's coldness, not the bastard name, not the seat below the high table. The foundational wound is Ned Stark's love expressing itself as a lie, sustained for Jon's entire childhood, and Jon never quite knowing for certain whether the man who raised him was telling him the truth about himself. Everything that follows, the Wall, the wildlings, the death and resurrection, the throne he does not want, everything flows from that original gap between what Jon was told and what was true. What Jon does with the wound is the first major choice the show presents him with. He could stay at Winterfell. He could find some lesser role within the household, a position that makes use of him without requiring Winterfell to acknowledge what he is, and he could make a life out of that. Some people would. Jon cannot. The prospect of spending his life in a place where he can see every day the distance between what he is allowed to have and what the name Stark would have given him is insupportable. So he joins the Night's Watch. His uncle Benjen Stark, who serves as First Ranger, makes the pitch in Winter is Coming. And there is something quietly devastating about the pitch when you listen to it carefully. Benjen lists all the things Jon will give up by taking the Black. Children, inheritance, a wife. He is describing the cost. And the reason Jon is not deterred is precisely because he does not have any of those things. He is giving up the theoretical possibility of a bastard's life in the North, a life that Catelyn has already made clear is not going to be much of anything. The Night's Watch looks to Jon, at this stage, like freedom, a place where the name Snow means nothing because everyone gives up their name. A brotherhood of men who chose to be there, which is a different kind of family than the one he grew up in, one where belonging is earned by presence and action, rather than being conditional on the accident of birth. A place where he can matter in a way that Winterfell will never allow. He is not entirely wrong. He has no idea what he is walking into. His goodbye to Arya in the King's Road is one of the warmest moments in the first season. He gives her a sword, the sword she will name Needle, light and slim and perfect for a slight girl who wants to learn to fight, and tells her to practice with it. Not to let anyone see. He says she is better than she knows. Think about what he is doing in this scene. Jon Snow, who has been told his whole life what he cannot have and cannot be, turns around in this goodbye and tells his sister exactly the opposite of what the world tells her. He gives her what no one has given him, the direct acknowledgement that she is capable of something the world has decided she is not supposed to do. He sees her the way he was not seen. He is young, and he is already, in this specific and small way, functioning at a moral level above the world that made him. He rides to Castle Black alongside Tyrion Lannister, who is traveling north to look at the Wall. Their conversations across the road are among the series' most revealing early character work. Tyrion tells Jon something that will take years to fully understand. He should never forget what he is, because the world will not. If he accepts what he is rather than fighting the fact of it, he can never be used against himself. Jon hears this as advice about managing the stigma of bastardy. It is actually advice about power. The distinction will not become clear to him for a long time. Castle Black is not what Jon expected. He arrives with a strong sword arm, a noble bearing, and a complete inability to relate to the men he is going to be trained alongside. They are criminals, mostly. Men who chose the Wall over execution or destitution. Men fleeing debts, scandals, crimes they have not been caught for yet. Many of them do not know which end of a sword to hold. Jon spends the first weeks of training putting every one of them on their back in the yard with something very close to contempt, and the training master Alliser Thorne lets him do it. Because Thorne despises Jon Snow from the first, despises the noble blood and the good training and the ease with which Jon makes the Brotherhood look inadequate, and Thorne is smart enough to know that nothing will isolate Jon from the other recruits faster than allowing him to publicly humiliate all of them repeatedly. The thing that breaks Jon of this is Samwell Tarly. There is a scene in Lord Snow, Season 1, Episode 3, which aired May 1st, 2011, where Jon intervenes to stop the other recruits from beating Sam. Sam is soft, he is frightened, he cries easily. He cannot swing a sword effectively. He is the kind of person that institutions like the Night's Watch receive because they take everyone, and who institutional life immediately identifies as the lowest status member available for sport. The recruits have decided this, and are acting on the decision when Jon steps in. He does not do it because anyone asked him to, not because a superior officer ordered it. He does it because he has been the person in the lesser position his whole life, not beaten for it, but looked through, dismissed, moved to the lower seat, sent away at convenient moments. He knows what it feels like to be in a room where your presence is tolerated rather than wanted. Sam Tarly is not Jon Snow. Their situations are not the same, but Jon recognizes the shape of Sam's experience because he has been living inside a version of it for years, and his body is between Sam and the others before he has consciously decided to move. What the friendship between Jon and Sam becomes over the course of the series is one of the structural facts of Game of Thrones that the show counts on without always calling attention to it. It is the one relationship in Jon Snow's story that does not end in loss. Everyone else Jon loves, Ygritte, Mormont, Stannis, in a complicated way, eventually Daenerys, everyone else is taken from him in some form. Sam persists. He is there at the beginning and he is there at the end, and his loyalty to Jon is absolute and unshakable in a way that no other character's loyalty is. He follows Jon into institutional exile without complaint. He tells Jon uncomfortable truths that no one else is willing to say. He is the one who discovers, in the archive at the Citadel in Old Town, the record that establishes Jon's true parentage. He is the one who tells Jon what he is. Sam matters to this story in ways that extend far beyond his role as a friend. He is the witness to all of it. Without him, Jon Snow never learns who he is, and without that knowledge, the final season plays out differently. Sam is not the hero. He is the person who makes the hero's choices possible by ensuring the hero has access to the truth. Maester Aemon shapes Jon in a different register. Aemon is ancient and blind, and speaks with the deliberateness of someone who has lived long enough to have watched most of what people believe turn out to be wrong. He is also, though Jon does not know this until near the end of Aemon's life, a Targaryen. Aemon Targaryen, great uncle to the royal family Jon belongs to, a man who served close to 100 years in the Night's Watch, while his family ruled and fell and burned. He chose the watch over the throne when the crown was offered to him, and then joined the Brotherhood to remove himself permanently from anyone who might use him as a rival. He has been advising Jon about the weight of the Targaryen name, without knowing he was doing it, for years, before either of them understands the connection. In Season 1, when news arrives that Ned Stark has been arrested for treason, Jon is ready to ride south. Every part of him is pointed toward the door. Aemon stops him. He tells Jon a story. He does not say it is his own story, but it is. About a man who watched the people he loved make choices he believed were wrong, and who was bound by his oath to do nothing about it. He describes the specific and unending grief of a person who chose duty and lived, for decades, with the cost of that choice. He describes it with the intimacy of someone who is not speaking theoretically. Jon hears this as wisdom about the Night's Watch. He does not yet know he is hearing a Targaryen describe the weight of the Targaryen name to the last Targaryen alive. He does not know he is receiving counsel from a blood relative. He is just a boy being told that duty and love will always be in conflict, and that the man he wants to become will require him to choose duty, repeatedly, at significant personal cost. He chooses duty. He stays at Castle Black. He watches his father die from a distance. It is the first of many times Jon Snow does the right thing and loses something he cannot recover. There is another thing Aemon gives Jon that is harder to name but equally important. He gives him permission to have been formed by his circumstances without being defined by them. Jon Snow grew up being told what he was by the shape of the household that contained him. Aemon, who grew up a Targaryen prince and chose a different life, and who has spent nearly a century being the person who made that choice, embodies a different possibility. He shows Jon by existing that the category you were born into is not the ceiling of what you can become. He does not say this. He demonstrates it by being who he is, at 100 years old, still sharp and still present, and still engaged with the problem of how to be a good person in a world that makes it difficult. Jon carries this, not consciously, not as a lesson he can articulate, but in the way he moves through subsequent seasons, the way he treats recruits who would be easy to dismiss, the way he extends trust to people who have not yet earned it, the way he makes decisions based on what he believes is right rather than what is institutionally convenient. You can see the influence of this very old, very specific man who chose to keep thinking carefully about how to live even when he had every reason to stop. By the end of Season 1, Jon Snow has received the two objects that will accompany him through the rest of the series. Ghost, his direwolf, always the white one, always the silent one, set slightly apart from the litter, even among the litter, and Longclaw, the Valyrian steel sword that Mormont gives him after Jon saves the Lord Commander's life from a wight that had broken into his quarters and was moving toward him. Jon burns the wight with an oil lamp, not because he was trained for this specific threat, because there is a dead man moving and he does not have time to think. Ghost and Longclaw, the wolf and the sword, both earned by doing something someone else needed rather than something Jon wanted. Both permanent marks he will carry into every conflict that follows. Both signifiers of who he is at the level below titles and names, the person who is there when it matters, the person who acts, the person who does not wait to be told. The season ends with the Night's Watch riding out north of the Wall in force for the first time in years, the Great Ranging. Jon has never been north of the Wall. The show has been building toward this territory since the very first scene of the very first episode. Two Ranger brothers finding something in the snow and not surviving the discovery. Jon is about to find out what lives out there in the cold. The Great Ranging begins in Season 2 and establishes, over several episodes, the geography and the ecology of the world north of the Wall in ways the show has only gestured at before. The haunted forest, the abandoned villages, the silence that has a specific quality, not the silence of empty places, but the silence of places where something happened and has not finished happening. What the Ranging finds, in its early weeks, is Craster. He lives in a keep he built himself, beyond the haunted forest, with his wives, who are also his daughters, and the arrangement of his household is one of the show's more carefully deployed examples of quotidian evil, not theatrical evil. Everyday evil, the kind that has been normalized so thoroughly that the person practicing it cannot imagine why anyone would object. Craster has a bargain with the White Walkers. His male children he leaves out in the cold as offerings. In exchange, the Walkers leave his household alone. It is a survival arrangement that has been operating for so long that it has acquired the texture of religious practice. Craster describes it without apology or shame, not because he lacks the capacity for shame, but because the arrangement predates, in his experience, any moral framework that would require him to feel it. Jon Snow looks at Craster with the specific expression of a person who recognizes the shape of something monstrous without needing it explained to him. He cannot prove what Craster is doing. He has no authority to stop it within the constraints of the Ranging. He cannot act, but he knows. And the knowing, the watching of something clearly wrong while being institutionally prevented from addressing it, is another wound added to the collection of wounds that will eventually define him. There is a through line here that matters for understanding who Jon Snow is. His entire life has consisted of recognizing things that other people around him were not seeing, or were choosing not to see, and being either too junior or too constrained by circumstance to address them. He saw what Catelyn's coldness meant, and could not address it. He sees what Craster is doing, and cannot address it. He will see what the White Walkers mean for the living world, and spend years fighting the institutional inertia of people who are looking in the wrong direction. His moral vision is consistently ahead of his institutional authority. That gap, between what he sees and what he can do, is the engine of his tragedy. Beyond Craster's, the Ranging reaches the Fist of the First Men, an ancient ring fort on a hill, commanding views in every direction, used by the First Men as a stronghold in the age before the wall was built. The Night's Watch makes camp here, and from here, Qhorin Halfhand selects Jon for the scouting mission that will determine the next 2 years of his life. Qhorin Halfhand is a legend, a man so experienced in the terrain north of the Wall that his name carries weight among the free folk themselves. He selects Jon not because Jon is the most experienced ranger, he is not, but because he sees in Jon something that the mission is going to require, someone who can perform a lie so completely that smart, perceptive people will not see through it. The mission is to get ahead of the wildling army and eliminate their scouts before they can relay the Night's Watch position to Mance Rayder. It goes wrong. The team is ambushed and killed in pieces. What is left, when the ambush is over, is Jon Snow and Qhorin, and a wildling woman named Ygritte, who Jon captured instead of killing. He captured her instead of killing her because he could not bring himself to do it. Not because he is soft, Jon Snow is demonstrably not soft, but because killing her in the snow felt wrong in a specific way that he cannot resolve through the logic of military necessity. She had surrendered. She was looking at him. He could not do it. She escapes and is recaptured, and during those hours they talk for the first time. Ygritte is direct in a way that cuts through Jon's defenses with an efficiency he was not prepared for. She sees the performance. She does not call it out exactly. She does not yet know the full truth of what he is, but she presses on the places where it is thin, and the thinness tells her things about who he actually is. Jon notices this. He also notices that she is smarter than he expected, and funnier, and that she says true things with a directness that he has not encountered outside of Aemon and Sam. He does not know what to do with her. When Qhorin and Jon are surrounded by wildlings and Qhorin makes the offer, the instruction to kill him, to give Jon the cover story of a genuine defection, to get Jon inside the wildling army as a spy, Jon accepts it. Not easily, not without understanding what he is agreeing to. He accepts it because Qhorin is right, and Jon Snow, when confronted with a correct analysis of an impossible situation, acts on the analysis. He kills Qhorin Halfhand in Valar Morghulis, Season 2, Episode 10, which aired June 3, 2012, in front of the wildlings, with his own sword. Qhorin goads him into it, says things designed to produce genuine fury, to make the performance of the killing look real to the wildlings watching. Jon kills him. The wildlings take Jon to Mance Rayder. Think about what Jon Snow has just done. He has killed a man who trusted him, a member of the Night's Watch. He has done it deliberately, with full knowledge, and the cover story now requires him to maintain it, to be, in every interaction with every wildling who follows, a man who abandoned his vows for reasons of conscience or self-interest. To inhabit that lie so completely that people who are experienced at reading people cannot see through it. This is the specific psychological cost of the mission. He must act against everything he values in order to protect everything he values. He must lie continuously to people who are going to trust him with their lives, and the lie has to touch something genuinely true inside him or it will not hold. And something genuinely true inside Jon Snow does eventually get touched by the wildlings. That is the part nobody anticipated. The King Beyond the Wall, as introduced in Valar Dohaeris, Season 3, Episode 1, which aired March 31st, 2013, is thoughtful and direct, and has the specific authority of someone who has been right for a long time in conditions where being wrong ends you. He asks Jon why he defected. Jon gives several versions of the answer. Mance cuts through all of them and asks for the truth. Jon says, he saw what happened at the Fist of the First Men. He did see it. The Night's Watch force at the Fist was destroyed by White Walker attack in the Season 2 finale. Jon survived only because he had been sent away on Corran's mission. But he saw the aftermath. He knows what came out of that dark. He tells Mance this not as a cover story, but as the actual truth, dressed in a deflection. Mance hears it. He is one of the few people taking the White Walker threat seriously on the correct grounds. Not prophecy, not politics, but the direct testimony of people who have seen the dead moving. Jon is integrated into the wildling army. What happens to him over the months that follow is one of the more psychologically interesting things the show does, and it does it almost entirely through implication rather than exposition. He is undercover. Every conversation he has with every wildling is built on a lie about who he is and why he is there. He cannot relax. He cannot stop monitoring himself for inconsistencies, cannot stop thinking about how what he is saying maps onto the cover story, cannot fully inhabit any moment because there is always the part of his mind that is tracking the performance. He is living at one remove from his own experience. And yet the wildlings, who have no investment in who he is supposed to be, keep pressing through to the person he actually is. Tormund Giantsbane does not particularly care about Jon's cover story. He cares about whether Jon can fight and whether Jon is someone whose judgment he can trust in the field. Jon can fight and his judgment is sound, and so Tormund treats him accordingly. Not with deference, not with suspicion, with the practical directness of a man who evaluates people by what they demonstrate rather than what they claim. This is the most honest relationship Jon has in Season 3, with the possible exception of Ygritte, and it is honest precisely because Tormund does not know who Jon is supposed to be. He travels with them through the northern landscape, learns their plans, learns the numbers, learns the approach to the wall. He also begins to understand something about the free folk that his training at Castle Black had not prepared him for. They are not raiders for the pleasure of raiding. They are people trying to survive something that everyone south of the wall is treating as a myth. Their aggression toward the north is the aggression of people who have been told they cannot come inside a house while something terrible chases them across the yard. This does not change what Jon is there to do. It does complicate his understanding of why both sides are in this position, and that complication will matter later in ways no one involved can foresee. The Cave is in Kissed by Fire, Season 3, Episode 5, which aired April 28, 2013. A geothermal spring behind a waterfall, warm in the cold, the kind of place that should not exist this close to the wall, but does. Jon breaks his vow of celibacy here. He does it deliberately and with full awareness, and the show frames it not as a moral failing, but as the only human thing he could have done in this specific situation. He is in love. The oath was written by old men for a different kind of man in a different kind of world, and he is not that man, and this is not that world. After the cave, Ygritte tells him she does not ever want to leave. She says it with the clarity of someone who knows they will have to and is naming the wish rather than pretending it can be fulfilled. She says, "Let us stay here. Let this be the whole world for a while." It is the thing people in love say when they know what is coming, and she knows what is coming. She is smarter than Jon about almost everything except the one thing Jon is right about. In The Climb, Season 3, Episode 6, which aired May 5, 2013, the wildling group including Jon and Ygritte scales the wall itself, 300 feet of ice, ascending with picks and crampons, in a group that has done this before and knows exactly how dangerous it is. Partway up, a section of the wall cracks and breaks away. Jon and Ygritte are left hanging on the rope, connected to each other but not to the wall, dangling over 300 feet of open air. Jon is holding them both with one pick driven into the ice. He does not let go. The pick holds. They swing. He does not let go. That is the behavioral read on Jon Snow at this stage of the story, delivered without dialogue. He does not calculate. He holds on. When something he cares about is falling, he holds on. The show does not make a speech out of this. It just shows you what he does. What is coming, after the cave and the climb and the months of traveling together, is the escape, the exposure, the moment when the lie and the truth are going to come apart from each other. In The Reigns of Castamere, Season 3, Episode 9, which aired June 2nd, 2013, the episode famous for the Red Wedding happening simultaneously in a great hall 300 miles south, Jon Snow refuses to kill an innocent man to prove his loyalty to the wildlings. He fights Orell the Warg, who has suspected him from the beginning, and whose raven eyes have been watching Jon the whole journey. He escapes on horseback toward Castle Black, and Ygritte, who had an arrow knocked and drawn and aimed, does not put it through his chest. She shoots him in the leg. 3 times, she could have killed him. The distance was nothing. Her aim is exact. She shoots him in the leg 3 times and lets him ride away. That choice, that specific decision to wound rather than kill, is the whole emotional map of how Ygritte felt about Jon Snow, delivered in about 3 seconds of action, and without a word of dialogue. The show does not slow down for it. It does not add music. It just shows you what she does, and trusts that you can read it. Jon rides to Castle Black bleeding and alone. He has completed the mission. He knows the wildlings' plans and numbers and approach. He has accomplished exactly what Qhorin Halfhand died to make possible. He has also destroyed the first relationship he has ever had that felt like an accurate description of who he actually was. He carries that. There is something worth sitting with in the specific architecture of what Jon Snow loses when Ygritte dies. He does not lose just a person he loved. He loses the only version of himself he has ever been able to be fully in the presence of another human being. Among the wildlings, Jon Snow had to be a lie. He was undercover. He could not tell the full truth of who he was and why he was there. But somehow, inside the lie, with Ygritte, something real emerged. She called out the places where the performance was thin, and what was underneath the performance was who he actually was. She saw that, she responded to it, and the relationship they built was between her real self and his real self, even though the architecture of the situation was built on deception. What this means is that Ygritte saw Jon Snow more clearly than almost anyone who knew him by his actual name. She did not know he was Night's Watch. She did not know his mission. But she knew what he was like when he laughed, and what he was like when he was uncertain, and what he was like when he was trying to be tough about something that was actually hard for him. She knew him in the way you know someone when you have been sleeping next to them in the cold and arguing with them about everything, and watching them make choices in situations where the stakes are immediate and real. He rides back to Castle Black carrying that, and what he does with it, what he does with the knowledge of what it means to be truly seen by someone, is one of the quieter threads in the rest of the series. He does not talk about it. He does not perform grief about it. He goes back to his work. He gets quieter. He proposes the mission to Craster's Keep within days of returning, because stillness with that knowledge is unbearable, and because the institutional justification is genuine. But the specific quality of attention that he develops in the months after Ygritte, the way he starts listening to the wildlings he encounters at Castle Black rather than simply managing them, the way he pays close attention to what the people who are supposed to be enemies actually want and believe, that quality comes, at least in part, from what she showed him about himself. She showed him that he could be seen and still be fine, that the world did not end if someone knew who he actually was, that the performance is not the same as the person underneath it. He had been carrying himself carefully, as if he would break if someone pressed too hard on the surface, since he was old enough to understand what he was in relation to the Starks. Ygritte pressed hard on the surface. He did not break, and that knowledge, that he can survive being known, is part of what makes him capable of the kind of leadership he demonstrates in the years that follow. She died in his arms in a burning courtyard, in the middle of a battle. He carries that too. Season 4 is where Jon Snow first becomes the person the series has been building him toward. The missions of Seasons 2 and 3 were formative, giving him the experience and the understanding that the later seasons will require. Season 4 is the test of whether the formation held. It begins in the shadow of loss. Ygritte is out there somewhere with a raiding party. Jon knows this. He proposes the mission to Craster's Keep because the institutional reason is real, the mutineers who killed Lord Commander Mormont there, during a revolt in And Now His Watch Is Ended, Season 3, Episode 4, which aired April 21, 2013, are a security risk. If Mance's scouts capture and question them, they will give up everything they know about Castle Black. Jon cannot allow that. The mission in Oathkeeper, Season 4, Episode 4, which aired April 27, 2014, succeeds. The mutineers are killed. Carl Tanner, who led the coup and has been running Craster's Keep with systematic cruelty in the weeks since, dies on Jon's sword in close, ugly combat. The sequence reveals something precise about Jon's relationship with violence. It is purposeful, contained, and complete when completion is called for. He is not brutal. He does not perform. He finishes it and moves on. The wildling army is in motion. Mance has put the plan Jon learned about in Season 3 into action. The attack will come from two directions, and in The Watchers on the Wall, Season 4, Episode 9, which aired June 8, 2014, the battle comes. It comes from two directions, as expected. Mance's main army attacks the southern gate of Castle Black from outside. A second force, raiders who had already crossed the wall further east, attacks from the north. The Night's Watch has 700 men, and the position requires several thousand. Jon assumes command when Alliser Thorne is wounded and Slynt proves himself useless. There is a famous continuous shot during the castle yard sequence, the camera moving through the chaos of the battle without cutting for over a minute, that follows the fight at ground level. What it shows you is not a heroic action sequence, but something more honest. People trying to survive in a small, cluttered space, with fire and steel and screaming, in the dark, with no clear sense of what is happening 20 feet in any direction. Jon is visible periodically, doing what needs doing. The shot is about the totality of the thing, rather than the individual within it. The show is being precise about what a battle actually is. Jon kills Styr, the Magnar of Thenn, in close combat that is visceral and ugly. It is not a duel between equals. It is two men hitting each other as hard as they can until one of them stops. Jon does not look triumphant when it ends. He looks like someone who just survived something and is already trying to determine what comes next. Something else happens in the tunnel beneath the wall during the battle that the show does not emphasize but that is worth naming. A giant breaks through the outer gate and begins moving toward the inner one, and Grenn, one of the recruits from Season 1, one of the men Jon looked down on initially and came to consider a brother, leads a small group of men to hold the inner gate against the giant. The giant kills them all. The gate holds. The show does not give Grenn a speech, or a close-up, or a dramatic send-off. It shows you the aftermath. The gate held, and Grenn is dead, and those two things are connected in the plainest possible way. The wall was defended by men who understood that the defense required their deaths and accepted it. Jon Snow does not have a monopoly on this kind of courage. The show is careful about that. Then Ygritte finds Jon in the courtyard. She has an arrow aimed at his chest. He sees her. She sees him. 1 second, one single second, where they are just the two people who loved each other, looking at each other across a burning courtyard, and the rest of the battle does not exist. Then Olly's arrow takes her from behind. She falls. Jon catches her. He holds her while she dies. The last thing she says is that they should have stayed in the cave. She says it once, clearly, without self-pity, with the flat calm of someone resolving a calculation they have already accepted. Not, I love you. Not, I hate you for leaving. Just, we should have stayed. We had the chance and we did not take it, and this is what followed. Then she is gone. Jon Snow knows she is right. He has always known she is right. He also knows that being right about what they should have done cannot coexist with being right about what the world required. Staying in the cave would have meant abandoning 10,000 people who needed the warning he was able to give. He could not have stayed, and she died for it. And the show holds on his face and lets you sit with both of those facts at once, without resolving the tension between them, because that tension is not the kind that resolves. The Battle of Castle Black ends. The Watch survives. Jon goes north under a flag of truce in The Children, Season 4, Episode 10, which aired June 15, 2014, to find Mance Rayder, to negotiate a peace, or to kill him if the situation requires it. The meeting between them is one of the better conversations in the first 4 seasons. Mance is not afraid of Jon. He does not perform bravado. He explains the campaign with the clarity of a man who has thought about it for years. He unified the free folk, not for conquest, but because the dead were coming and the only survival was south. Not invasion, evacuation. He is trying to save his people the same way Jon is trying to save everyone else. They are, at the deepest level of the conflict, fighting the same war. Stannis Baratheon arrives before anything can be decided. His cavalry routs the wildling camp in minutes. Mance is taken prisoner, and Jon Snow watches the man he spent years working against be captured by a king he does not particularly trust, understanding, watching it happen, that the shape of the problem he has been working on is about to change into something even more complicated. Stannis offers Jon the lordship of Winterfell. He will legitimize Jon as Jon Stark, heir to the north, in exchange for Jon's loyalty and assistance. It is everything Jon has wanted since childhood, the name he was born without, the inheritance he could never claim. Jon turns it down. He turns it down because the vow he swore is the vow he swore, and taking a title from Stannis in exchange for political loyalty would make the oath meaningless. And if the oath is meaningless, then everything he has spent 3 years defending was theater. He cannot make that calculation work. Then the Night's Watch elects him Lord Commander. Sam Tarly nominates him in a piece of political maneuvering that is one of the quieter triumphs of the early seasons. Sam, who is not supposed to be good at politics, and who turns out to be exactly good enough at it when the stakes are highest, stands up in the assembly and makes the case. The brothers look at Jon and decide Sam is right. Jon wins by a narrow margin. He gets what he actually wanted. Not the name, not Winterfell, the respect of the men he serves, earned through what he has done, in the only institution in Westeros where merit is the only currency. There is a scene just after the election where Jon is alone for a moment before the others come to congratulate him, and the show holds on his face. He looks the way a person looks when something they have worked toward has arrived, and they are in the process of understanding that having the thing is not the same as wanting it. He wanted to matter. He wanted to be seen. He wanted the recognition of the people he works alongside. He has all of that now. What he has not fully accounted for is that having it means being the person everyone looks to when the decision is hard. It means being the person who gets blamed when the decision goes wrong. It means having no one to share the weight with, because the Lord Commander is the Lord Commander, and that specific position is permanently alone in a way that no other position in the Watch is. The very next decision he makes in the role, the wildling policy, the bringing of the free folk through the wall, is also the most consequential decision of his tenure, and the one that eventually kills him. He does not make it lightly. He does not make it without understanding the political cost. He makes it because it is the correct thing to do, which is the same reason he has made every significant decision in his life. There is a version of Jon Snow's story where he reaches this point, Lord Commander, the recognition of his brothers, the actual authority to do what he believes needs doing, and the story calls it a victory. A hard-won victory after years of being the bastard who was not quite allowed to fully belong anywhere. That is not quite what the show does. The show gives him the recognition and then immediately asks him to spend it on the most politically costly decision he has ever made. The triumph and the cost arrive at the same time. That has always been the pattern. Season 5 is where Jon Snow's story arrives at its most fundamental crisis so far, and it is a crisis that is entirely of his own making, made not through error but through clarity. He is Lord Commander. He has real power for the first time. Real power means the ability to make decisions that cannot be overridden. It also means the full weight of what follows when those decisions produce consequences the people around you were not prepared for. The first major decision, the wildlings. He decides to let them through the wall. This needs to be stated plainly. Jon Snow, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, the institution whose entire purpose for 8,000 years has been to keep what is north of the wall from coming south, decides to open the gates and settle tens of thousands of free folk on Night's Watch lands and in the Gift. He does this because the alternative is leaving them north of the wall, where the Night King can raise them as whites. He does the math. A living enemy who dislikes you is a containable problem. 100,000 dead soldiers under the Night King's command is an unsurvivable one. He understands this because he has seen what the White Walkers can do. He was at the Fist of the First Men. He knows what emerged from that dark. He has evidence his brothers do not have. His brothers do not accept the conclusion, even when they follow the math. 8,000 years of institutional identity does not update because of one man's report from beyond the wall. The Night's Watch has always been the thing between the wildlings and the South. Opening the gate represents, to every man in the Watch who has not seen what Jon has seen, the betrayal of everything the institution exists to protect. Jon does it anyway. The specific decision-making in Kill the Boy, Season 5, Episode 5, which aired May 10, 2015, where Jon meets with Tormund Giantsbane to propose the deal, and simultaneously executes Janos Slynt publicly for refusing a direct order, is one of the most revealing sequences in the season. The execution is abrupt and final. Slynt begs. Jon's face is the face of someone doing a necessary thing with the minimum amount of theater. The message of the execution is not cruelty, it is clarity. Jon Snow will do the hard thing. He will do it quickly, and he will do it himself. The men who are about to kill him for his wildling policy at least know, watching Slynt drop, that Jon Snow means what he says. The journey to Hardhome is in the episode of the same name, Season 5, Episode 8, which aired May 31st, 2015. Jon and Tormund sail north with a small fleet to a wildling settlement on the northeastern coast beyond the Wall, where several thousand free folk have been surviving the increasingly harsh winters. The negotiation on the beach is difficult. The wildlings at Hardhome see a crow. They see the institution that has been their enemy for generations. They have no reason to trust him. A significant portion refuse. A significant portion, eventually, agree. They begin boarding the ships. The argument is working. The deal is coming together. Then the dead arrive. The sequence at Hardhome is one of the greatest things Game of Thrones ever produced. It begins with a winter storm descending from the cliffs above the settlement, arriving too fast, from the wrong direction, in the specific way that people who have seen this before recognize immediately. The gates close. Jon and his men and the wildlings already on the boats watch from the water as the whites come over the walls. What follows is a sustained sequence of controlled horror, not spectacle for its own sake, a sequence designed to show, through Jon's experience, what the actual stakes of this story are. Not the politics of succession, not the Game of Thrones, the real stakes. An endless tide of dead bodies that does not stop and does not feel and cannot be reasoned with or bought or frightened. Bodies that have been reanimated by something that does not have preferences or politics or hesitation, something that just comes. Jon fights a White Walker lieutenant in the storehouse, where the dragonglass is kept. He loses his dragonglass when the White Walker knocks him backward. He grabs Longclaw instead. The White Walker brings his ice blade down, expecting Valyrian steel to shatter the way everything else does. Longclaw does not shatter. The Valyrian steel meets the ice blade and holds, and Jon drives Longclaw through the White Walker, and the White Walker shatters into fragments. He discovers this in the middle of a battle, by accident, because he had no other weapon available. He learns the most important tactical fact about the war he is fighting, that Valyrian steel can kill White Walkers the same way dragonglass can, by having no other option and acting on what he had. That is the specific texture of Jon Snow's most important discoveries throughout the series. He is there. He acts. He finds out what is true by doing it rather than by preparing to do it. The preparation is always incomplete. The presence is always complete. He escapes to the boats. Most of the wildlings he came to save are dead on the shore, and then the Night King raises them. He walks to the edge of the dock. He looks at Jon Snow across the water, looks at him with something that is not hostility and is not challenge, but is closer to acknowledgement, recognition. He looks at the thousands of bodies on the shore, wildlings and Night's Watch brothers, and free folk women and children who died defending the docks, and he raises his arms. Palms up, slowly. The gesture of someone who is performing rather than acting, showing rather than doing. Every body on that shore twitches, eyes open, blue, all of them at once, in the specific horror of a thing that should be sequential happening simultaneously. The Night King does not speak. He does not need to. He is making a demonstration for an audience of one. He is showing Jon Snow exactly what his army is, exactly what it is capable of, and exactly what every person left behind at Hardhome now is. They are soldiers, on the wrong side, and there will be more of them, every day, until there is no one left to add. Jon watches from the water. The expression on his face is not fear. It is something that looks like recognition, and also like grief. He is seeing the truth of the world he lives in, stripped of the stories people tell themselves about power and succession and the Game of Thrones. He is seeing what actually matters. He is seeing, with perfect clarity, that almost nobody in Westeros understands it yet, and that the gap between what he knows and what everyone else knows is going to be the source of most of the suffering that follows. He returns to Castle Black carrying that knowledge. The weight of being the only person in the room who has seen the thing is what makes everything that follows so difficult. There is a scene after Hardhome worth describing, even though it is not a dramatic scene. Jon stands in front of his assembled brothers and tells them what happened at Hardhome. He tells them about the Whites and the White Walkers and the Night King raising the dead. He tells them about Valyrian steel. He tells them about the scale of what is coming. He tells them what he saw. The brothers watch him. They hear him. And the show lets you see, in their faces, that what Jon is describing is too large for them. Not because they are stupid, because the thing Jon is describing is so far outside the range of anything the institutional training of the Night's Watch has prepared them for, that it does not quite land as real. It sounds like the ravings of a man who has been beyond the wall too long. They hear him and they do not quite believe him, and the ones who believe him do not know what to do with what they believe. This is one of the more psychologically precise things the show does with the concept of institutional knowledge. The Night's Watch knows what to do when the wildlings are coming. It has protocols for raids, for ranging, for diplomatic communication with the free folk, for managing the logistics of the wall. It does not have a protocol for the Night King. The Night King is not a problem that fits inside any of the categories the institution was built to address. And Jon Snow is standing in front of men whose entire professional identity is organized around those categories, asking them to update everything they know about what they are defending against, based on the testimony of one man. He cannot make them believe it fully. He can make them see it happened. He can make them afraid. What he cannot do is give them the direct experience of standing on that dock and watching the dead rise. That experience lives in him alone, and it cannot be transferred. And the gap between what he knows and what they know is going to produce, as gaps between what a leader knows and what the institution knows always do, the specific kind of tragedy that arrives when the man who is right cannot convince the people who need to act on what he knows. The institutional logic of the Night's Watch cannot accommodate what Jon knows. The men who are furious about the wildlings policy are furious about the right things in the wrong order of priority. They are angry about tradition, about identity, about the 8,000-year understanding of what the Night's Watch is and does. They are not wrong that the tradition matters. They are wrong that the tradition is the most urgent thing. Jon is standing in meetings about tactical arrangements and chain of command and Night's Watch precedent, and he is the only person in the room who has watched the Night King raise the dead on a shore 3 miles north of where they are sitting. He is arguing about the arrangement of deck chairs on a ship he can see sinking, with people who are looking in the wrong direction. Alliser Thorne is not stupid. He is not purely a schemer. He is a man who has given his life to the Night's Watch, and who genuinely believes Jon Snow is destroying the institution he loves. His opposition is sincere. His belief that Jon is dangerous is sincere. The assassination he participates in, he would not call it assassination, he would call it a correction, a restoration, is the sincere act of a man who believes he is saving the Watch from the man who leads it. Olly is different in kind. Olly is a child whose village was destroyed by a wildling raiding party, his parents killed, his community erased, everything he knew ending in fire and blood. He has a specific, personal, fully justified terror of the free folk. And Jon Snow took him in and treated him with kindness, and then proceeded to make the wildlings welcome at Castle Black. Olly's hatred of the wildlings is not a political position. It is the scar tissue of trauma, and no amount of strategic explanation, no amount of Jon telling him that sometimes a man must do difficult things because the larger situation demands it, can reach through scar tissue. Jon knows this. He tries anyway. It does not work. In Mother's Mercy, Season 5, Episode 10, which aired June 14, 2015, the lure is simple. Someone has information about Benjen Stark, Jon's uncle, First Ranger, who went ranging north of the wall in Season 1 and never came back. The message they have set up reads, "Traitor." Jon walks toward it and understands what it means while he is still walking and cannot run fast enough. Alliser Thorne steps forward first. For the Watch, he drives in the knife. Bowen Marsh steps forward, weeping while he does it. Weeping not because he believes he is wrong, but because he is the kind of person who can cry while doing something terrible and still complete the action. Others step forward. Each says, "For the Watch." It is not frenzied. There is no rage in it. It is the systematic execution of a decision that was made in advance. carried out by men who believe they are performing a duty to an institution they love. Then Olly steps forward, and Jon says his name, just Olly. Not as accusation and not as plea, just the recognition. I see who is standing in front of me. I see what this means. Olly drives the knife in. Jon Snow bleeds out in the snow. His blood spreads across the white. The season ends there. The show never returns to this moment from another character's perspective. No one inside Castle Black comes outside and sees what happened and reacts. The body just lies there in the snow with the camera on it, and then the season ends. This is not an accident. The decision to end the season on that image, rather than moving immediately to the reaction, tells you something important about what the show thinks the assassination means. It means Jon Snow is dead. Not narratively complicated dead, not dramatically convenient dead, just dead, in the snow, alone, with his blood around him. The show holds on this long enough that you feel it. The men who killed him believe they have done the right thing. That is not a small part of what makes the scene devastating. If they believed they were doing something wrong, if this were villainy in the conventional sense, it would be a different kind of scene, but each of them stabbed him believing they were defending the Night's Watch from a Lord Commander who was going to destroy it. Each of them said, "For the Watch," and meant it. The institutional logic that led to Jon Snow's death is not the logic of malice. It is the logic of an institution defending itself against change. And Jon Snow was the change. He was the thing that the Night's Watch could not accommodate without becoming something different than it had been for 8,000 years. His wildling policy, his communication with Mance, his willingness to let the wildlings through the gate, all of it represented a fundamental restructuring of what the Night's Watch was for. You could agree with Jon's reasoning, and still understand why the institution rejected it. Institutions are very good at defending their own continuity. They are much less good at accommodating the information that might require them to change. Jon Snow was killed by an institution defending its identity against a man who understood the institution's purpose better than the institution did. That is a very specific kind of tragedy, and it is one that the show will return to, in different forms, at different scales, with different characters, for the rest of its run. For months after, the internet conducted one of the most sustained collective denial campaigns in the history of serialized television. Kit Harington was photographed on set in Belfast during production of Season 6. The showrunners said he was dead, done, finished, not coming back. Everyone knew he was coming back. Nobody would admit to knowing. What Game of Thrones does with the immediate aftermath of Jon's death in The Red Woman, the Season 6 premiere that aired April 24, 2016, is worth careful attention. The episode does not rush toward the miracle. It opens on Jon's body. Ghost, his direwolf, is sitting beside the body, awake and quiet in the way animals are quiet when something has happened that they cannot explain. Davos Seaworth walks out and finds the body and stands over it. Davos is an interesting choice for this moment. He has no connection to the Night's Watch. He is Stannis' former hand, a man who came north with Stannis' army and stayed after Stannis marched south to his death at the Boltons' hands. His ward Shireen, Stannis' daughter, whom Davos loved like his own child, whom he had taught to read and walked with in the cold and laughed with at her bad jokes, was burned alive as a sacrifice to the Lord of Light. He has nothing, no allegiances, no cause, no particular reason to care whether Jon Snow is alive or dead. And he decides that Jon Snow cannot just lie there. Not because he knew Jon well, or because he was promised anything, but because Davos Seaworth is a person who cannot leave a wrong thing unremedied when he has any capacity to address it. This specific quality, which is, more than any other single thing, also Jon Snow's quality, is why Davos, the person with the least stake in Jon's survival, is the one who decides to do something about it. He goes to Melisandre. Melisandre is in her room staring at the fire. She has just watched Stannis' army destroyed and Stannis killed, and the sacrifice of Shireen, which she authorized, which she believed in with the full force of her conviction, which she told Stannis was necessary and righteous, accomplished nothing. She is not in a crisis of faith in the theatrical sense. She is in the state that comes after crisis, the vacancy where conviction used to be. She is very old, sustained by a magic she wears literally around her neck, and she may never have experienced what she is experiencing now, the simple possibility that everything she believed was wrong. Davos asks her to try to bring Jon back. She says she has never done this. Thoros of Myr has the ability to resurrect Beric Dondarrion. He has done it 6 times, but she does not know if she has the same gift. She says she no longer trusts what she sees in the flames. He says, "Try." What happens in Home, Season 6, Episode 2, which aired May 1st, 2016, is one of the most carefully constructed scenes in the series. Melisandre washes Jon's wounds. She cuts his hair and his beard. She places her hands on him and speaks the prayer in High Valyrian. Nothing happens. She speaks it again. Nothing. The others in the room, Davos, Tormund, Ed, begin to leave, one by one. Davos is the last to go. Melisandre is alone. She says the prayer one final time, not loudly, not with ceremony, just the words, spoken by a person who is not sure they mean anything anymore, because she is not sure she means anything anymore. Nothing happens. She leaves. Ghost, who has been asleep in the corner, lifts his head. Jon Snow draws a breath. No music, no dramatic cut, no slow motion return. He wakes up the way you wake from a nightmare, gasping, sitting bolt upright, eyes open and not knowing where he is. The camera holds on him while he finds himself, while he figures out whether he is solid. His chest is still bleeding from the wounds that killed him. His eyes are open. They are his eyes. He is back. The question the show raises in the weeks following, and holds carefully rather than resolving, is, what is he back as? What is the Jon Snow who has died and been resurrected? What does death do to a person who has been there and come back? He is quieter, more certain about some things and less defended about others. He says flat things in a flat voice. He did what he thought was right and he was killed for it. He says this not with bitterness, and not with the performance of stoic acceptance, but with the calm of a man who has updated his understanding of the world based on evidence. He has been somewhere. He will not say exactly where. When people ask what he saw on the other side, he says nothing, just nothing. But the experience has burned away something, not his sense of right and wrong. That is intact. Something else has gone. The expectation, maybe, that the world will eventually acknowledge his choices as correct. He no longer carries that expectation. It makes him both sadder and somehow more effective. The Night's Watch oath says, "It shall not end until my death." He died. The oath ended. He is, by the literal terms of the vow, released. The show uses this reasoning because it needs Jon south of the wall, and it does not pretend the reasoning is more than convenient. But it is also, in the logic of this specific character, true in the way that matters. Jon Snow does not decide the vow was meaningless. He decides it was complete. This matters because it tells you something about how Jon Snow processes the events of his life. He does not rationalize. He does not find reasons to do what he wants to do and dress them up as principle. When he stayed at Castle Black after Ned's death, he stayed because the vow said stay, and he believed in the vow. When he leaves Castle Black after his resurrection, he leaves because the vow said it ends at his death, and it ended. He treats the oath as a real thing with real terms, not as a flexible framework he can reinterpret when it becomes inconvenient. This is both his greatest strength and the source of most of his suffering. A person with a more flexible relationship to principle would find ways to do what they want while maintaining the performance of integrity. Jon cannot do this. The principle is the principle. The vow is the vow. The cost is the cost. He pays it. What he is after the resurrection, quieter, more certain, less defended, reflects the specific experience of having been somewhere and come back. He does not elaborate on what he saw on the other side of death. He says, when pressed, that there was nothing, just nothing. No gods, no judgment, no continuation, just the absence of being. He says this, without particular distress, the way you describe a place you visited that was smaller and more ordinary than you expected. Just nothing. This is, if you accept it at face value, one of the most important pieces of information in the show. Jon Snow has been dead. He has seen what comes after, and what he reports is nothing. Not fire and blood, not the Lord of Light, not whatever cosmological reward the faithful might hope for. Nothing. And he comes back from that nothing and continues to make the same choices he made before, based on the same values, for the same reasons. He does the right thing, not because he believes it will be rewarded. He does it because it is right. The nothing did not change that. In Oathbreaker, Season 6, Episode 3, which aired May 8, 2016, he hangs the men who killed him. Alliser Thorne, Bowen Marsh, Othel Yarwick, Olly. He cuts the ropes himself. The show does not give him a speech. He watches them drop, and the expression on his face is the expression of a man removing an obstacle. Then he takes off his Lord Commander's cloak and hands it to Ed and walks through the gate. Whatever comes next will come from somewhere other than the institution that killed him. What comes next is Sansa. The reunion between Jon and Sansa in Book of the Stranger, Season 6, Episode 4, which aired May 15, 2016, is one of the more genuinely moving scenes in the later seasons. They were never close, Jon the Bastard, Sansa the eldest trueborn daughter, their lives overlapping without especially intersecting, and yet they hold each other for a long time in that courtyard, and then they cry. Because they are the only Starks they have found. Because everything each of them has survived, which, between the two of them, is almost more than the mind can hold, is present in that embrace, without needing to be named. Sansa brings the news about Ramsay Bolton, about Rickon, about Winterfell. She wants Jon to lead the fight to take it back. Jon does not want to fight. He is sitting by a fire, and he looks tired, in a way that is different from physical exhaustion, the weariness of a man who has been required to care about outcomes for longer than he has the capacity to sustain them. He says he has been fighting his whole life. He says he is tired. Sansa will not accept this. This is not the Sansa of Season 1 who wept at the sight of blood. This is someone who has been through the kind of experience that either destroys a person or transforms them into something that cannot be destroyed, and who has chosen transformation. She says it with the cold clarity of someone who has decided what she is. The North is their home. Ramsay is going to kill Rickon. They have to go. Jon looks at her and sees the truth. He goes. The March on Winterfell is a study in political frustration. They visit northern houses calling in the old loyalty to Stark. Most of them hedge. House Glover refuses outright. House Mormont commits 60 men and the complete moral authority of 12-year-old Lyanna Mormont, whose authority turns out to be more significant than her age or her army suggest. Tormund brings the wildlings. The total force is too small and everyone knows it. Jon knows it and goes anyway. The alternative, leaving Rickon with Ramsay, leaving Winterfell in Bolton hands, spending the rest of his life as a man who knew what was right and did not do it, is not a life he can sustain. The morning of Battle of the Bastards, Season 6, Episode 9, which aired June 19, 2016, Ramsay Bolton releases Rickon Stark into the open field and tells him to run. He says if Rickon reaches the other side, he lives. Rickon runs. Jon Snow knows, watching Rickon run in a straight line, that this is a trap within a game. There is no version of this where Ramsay lets Rickon live. The whole performance is designed to produce what it produces. Jon spurring his horse into the open, alone, toward the full Bolton army, driven by the same quality that makes him a great leader and a disastrous tactical thinker in moments of grief and fury. He cannot watch his brother die without making the attempt. Rickon is shot through with an arrow seconds before Jon's outstretched hand could have reached him. Jon Snow, shattered, charges the entire Bolton army alone. This image, one man on a horse, riding full speed at a line of armed cavalry with no backup and no plan, is the defining image of the battle, and one of the defining images of the series. He is not brave here. He is not strategic. He has been broken open by Rickon's death, and what grief and fury produce, when there is no rational way to address either, is exactly this: the action that looks like courage from the outside, and feels from the inside like the absence of any alternative. His army comes in behind him, the battle joins, and then Ramsay's trap closes. The Bolton infantry advances from three sides, shield wall, locked together with no gaps. Jon's men are contained between the closing walls and a mound of their own dead that Ramsay has arranged as a barrier. Men die. Men are crushed by the bodies pressing in from behind, while the shield wall holds them at the front. The circle tightens. Jon is pushed under the surface by the weight of bodies and fights his way back up and gasps air, and can see clearly that they are going to lose. The Knights of the Vale arrive. Sansa arranged it. She was in contact with Petyr Baelish without telling Jon. She made the deal that Jon would not make and did not know was being made. The Vale cavalry rolls up Ramsay's flanks. The formation breaks in minutes. Jon pursues Ramsay into Winterfell. He breaks through Ramsay's shield with Longclaw and beats him to the ground with his bare hands. He beats him past the point where Ramsay can fight back, past the point where it is about stopping a threat, into a place that is about something else, about Rickon, about the performance on the field, about every specific cruelty Ramsay has delivered to the people Jon cares about. He is still beating him when he sees Sansa watching from the walls. He stops himself from killing him because of Sansa. That is the behavioral read. Not because he decided Ramsay deserved to live. Not because he had a principled opposition to execution. Because he saw Sansa and understood that this decision belonged to her, not to him. He steps back. He leaves Ramsay for Sansa. Sansa feeds him to his own dogs. The scene of Ramsay's death is one of the more thoughtful things the show does with consequence in the later seasons. It is not triumphant. It is not cathartic in the way that clean victories are cathartic. Sansa watches Ramsay be killed by his dogs with the expression of a woman who is checking something off a list. Not because she does not feel it, but because feeling it would require her to be softer than she currently is, and she cannot afford to be softer than she currently is. The show does not give her a speech about justice or closure. It just holds on her face while it happens, and lets you read whatever is there. In the Great Hall of Winterfell, Lyanna Mormont stands up and names Jon Snow, the White Wolf, the King in the North. The hall takes it up. Jon holds this moment with the expression of a man being handed a heavy thing that he already knows is going to be difficult to carry. The declaration is worth looking at carefully, because what is happening in that hall is politically unusual. Jon Snow is not the biological heir to Winterfell. He is not even, at this moment, a true-born Stark. That truth is years away from being revealed. He is a bastard leading an army that includes wildlings, winning a title from lords who have every historical reason to distrust the claim. The declaration is the North choosing him, not because of his blood, but because of what he has demonstrated. The Night's Watch elected him for the same reason. This is the recurring pattern of Jon Snow's life. The title always comes from what he does, never from what he is, because what he is has always been contested. There is something Jon does not say in that hall that would be very easy to say. He does not say, "I know who I actually am." He does not say, "The name you are giving me is not the name I was born with, and the man you are declaring for is not quite the man you think you are declaring for." He does not say any of this, because the truth is not his to tell yet. It is Bran's truth, preserved in a vision, and Sam's truth, preserved in an archive, and neither of them has put the pieces together yet. He carries it north, eventually, to Dragonstone, because the dragonglass under that island is the only material he knows of that can slow the army of the dead, and the only person who can give him access to it is Daenerys Targaryen. Before Jon leaves for Dragonstone, there is a scene in Winterfell that the show handles with characteristic restraint. He is in the Great Hall, about to depart, and Sansa is the last person he speaks to. She is going to rule the North in his absence. He is putting this in her hands, and what passes between them in that conversation is a complicated negotiation between two people who trust each other, who are also in conflict about how to handle the political situation, and who are both right and both wrong in their respective positions. Sansa asks Jon, "What if Cersei never comes? What if Daenerys is the real threat?" Jon does not fully answer this. He says Daenerys is not the enemy. He says the real enemy is North. He says he needs the dragonglass and the armies or none of it matters. He is right about all of this. What he does not adequately account for, in this conversation and in the months that follow, is Sansa's read on Daenerys, a read that will turn out to be more accurate than Jon's. He is bad at being suspicious of people he has decided to trust. This is not a flaw exactly. The alternative is being the kind of person who cannot trust anyone, and that kind of person cannot build the alliances that win wars. But it does mean that Jon Snow's relationship with Daenerys is built on a genuine conviction that she is who she says she is, and that conviction makes him slower to see what Sansa sees almost immediately. Jon Snow arrives at Dragonstone in The Queen's Justice, Season 7, Episode 3, which aired July 30th, 2017. Daenerys receives him in the throne room and asks him to bend the knee. Jon asks for dragonglass and an alliance. Neither is immediately willing to give the other what they want without getting what they came for. They sit in the Great Hall and argue with intelligence and stubbornness from both sides, and the show does not make either of them look obviously right, because neither of them is. Daenerys' position is rational. Bend the knee, a political gesture that costs nothing in material terms but establishes the order of their alliance. Jon's position is also rational. Bending the knee to Daenerys would be a betrayal of the Northern Lords who named him king without their consent. Two correct positions in direct conflict. What breaks the standoff is the cave beneath Dragonstone, where the children of the forest left carvings in obsidian thousands of years ago, images of humans and the children fighting together against the White Walkers. Evidence that the Long Night is not a legend, that this has happened before. Daenerys looks at the carvings. She accepts the evidence. She says she will fight alongside him against the dead. If he bends the knee, he bends the knee. He does it because it is the correct thing to do, and because he is Jon Snow. The cost is the trust of the Northern Lords. That is the price. He pays it. There is a version of the Jon-Daenerys relationship that the internet decided to be cynical about, because the show moved quickly, because the setup was compressed into 7 episodes, because the finale of Season 7 felt rushed in ways the earlier seasons did not. That cynicism is understandable, but it misses something real about what the show was doing with these two specific people. Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen are the only 2 characters in Game of Thrones who have both experienced the following: leading people who had no particular reason to trust them, watching those people die for them, making the decision to sacrifice political capital for the sake of doing what was right, and being punished for that decision before eventually being vindicated. They are the only 2 people in the story who understand, from direct and specific experience, what it costs to be the person who says the difficult true thing and fights for it against institutional resistance. This is not nothing. This is, in fact, the most they have in common with any other person in the story. Nobody else in Westeros has that exact combination of experiences. Not Sansa, not Tyrion, not Cersei. Jon and Daenerys meet as strangers and find, surprisingly quickly, that they are speaking a language the other understands. It does not look like falling in love. It looks like recognition. Something develops between Jon and Daenerys in Season 7 that the show tracks with more care than the discourse around it usually acknowledges. It begins as professional respect between 2 people who recognize in each other a specific quality, the willingness to sacrifice for something larger than themselves. It deepens through what each of them reveals to the other in the weeks at Dragonstone: his conviction, her struggle with the isolation of command, their shared experience of being dismissed by people who held power and being proven right by the world. In Beyond the Wall, Season 7, Episode 6, which aired August 20th, 2017, Jon leads an expedition north of the Wall to capture a white as proof of the army of the dead. The expedition goes wrong. Jon is left behind as the others escape. Daenerys comes north with her dragons to rescue him. She loses Viserion. The Night King brings down one of her dragons with an ice spear, the first time she has ever lost one of her children. The first time someone has demonstrated the ability to actually hurt her where she is most vulnerable. She watches Viserion fall into the frozen lake, and she understands, watching it, that this war is real, and the enemy is real, and the cost is going to be specific and personal in a way she had not fully processed before. Jon's half-frozen body is pulled from the water. She sits beside him while he recovers on the ship. He wakes up. He calls her Dany, the name from her childhood, the name no one has used for her in years, the name from before all of it. She tells him not to. He apologizes. She says, "Do not apologize. It is almost too much to say." He swears fealty to her. He calls her his queen. He does not do this as a performance. He has bent the knee. He has accepted what she is. He is telling her that the political gesture was also, somewhere in there, true. On the ship back from Eastwatch, the show finds their hands together in the dark. It does not explain this. It just shows it and trusts you to understand what it means. What neither of them knows, while any of this is happening, is what Samwell Tarly and Bran Stark are in the process of discovering. Sam came across a notation in the archive at the Citadel in Old Town, a record kept by High Septon Maynard, of a secret ceremony he performed in Dorne. He annulled the marriage of Rhaegar Targaryen to Elia Martell and married Rhaegar to Lyanna Stark. Legally, secretly, in Dorne. Bran saw the Tower of Joy in a vision, Ned Stark arriving, Lyanna dying in childbed, handing Ned a baby and whispering a name. The Tower of Joy sequence was shown in pieces across Season 6, completed in The Winds of Winter, the Season 6 finale that aired June 26, 2016. The baby's dark eyes open. Ned looks at his nephew and sees in him the thing he has to protect above everything else. Sam and Bran put the information together in The Dragon and the Wolf, the Season 7 finale that aired August 27, 2017. The conclusion is straightforward and devastating. Jon Snow is not the bastard son of Rhaegar Targaryen. He is the legitimate son, born of a legal marriage. His name, the name Lyanna whispered to Ned in the tower, is Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. The scene cuts from this conversation in Winterfell to a ship carrying Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen from Dragonstone to White Harbor. They are in her cabin. The show does not linger but makes clear what is happening. They are aunt and nephew. They do not know it. The dramatic irony is complete. The audience knows what is happening on that ship in a way that neither person on it does. The man is not who he thinks he is. The woman is not what he thinks she is to him. And what they are building together contains, built into its foundation, the complication that will eventually end it. Season 8 of Game of Thrones opens in Winterfell as Jon rides home alongside Daenerys, her armies, and her 2 remaining dragons. He is bringing an alliance. He is bringing reinforcements. He is bringing the best chance the North has against the army of the dead. He is also arriving in a place where his political decisions over the previous season have shifted the ground in ways he cannot fully see. The Northern Lords receive Daenerys in silence. Not hostile, people are frightened, but the absence of welcome is notable. They bow to Jon. They look at Daenerys and do not bow. She notices. The gap between what Jon has promised her in terms of political acceptance and what the North is actually prepared to give begins to be visible immediately. Sansa Stark sees Daenerys clearly from the first encounter. This is worth stating plainly, not as a criticism of Jon, but as an accurate description of what happens in the season. Sansa reads Daenerys correctly. The need for deference, the discomfort with people who do not position themselves in her orbit, the pride that sits very close to the surface. She is right about all of this. Jon is also right that the alliance was necessary. The dragonglass, the armies, the dragons were all essential and they came from Daenerys. Both of them are correct about different aspects of an impossible situation. Sam tells Jon the truth in the crypt beneath Winterfell before the battle that is coming. He says, "Your father was Ned Stark, but not in the way you think." He says, "Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark were married. Ned kept the secret to protect you. Your name is Aegon Targaryen. You are the heir to the Iron Throne." Jon's first response is that it is not true. His second is a defense of Ned Stark's honor. Sam says he lied about being your father because the truth would have gotten you killed. He pauses. Then he says something Jon cannot immediately answer. "You gave up your crown for your people, would she?" Jon has no response to this. Not because he does not want to defend Daenerys, because the question is genuinely open and he knows it. There is a scene in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, Season 8, Episode 2, which aired April 21st, 2019, the night before the battle, when everyone who might die tomorrow is spending the evening differently, where Jon is in the crypt with Daenerys. They are standing in front of Lyanna Stark's statue. Daenerys is talking about Rhaegar Targaryen, about how she grew up hating him, believing he abducted and killed Lyanna, because that was the story the Targaryen exile maintained about why the war happened. Then Jon tells her the truth. He tells her that Rhaegar did not rape Lyanna, that they were married, that the child Lyanna gave birth to in the Tower of Joy is Jon Snow, that his name is Aegon Targaryen. Daenerys' first response is political. She says, "If this is true, you have a claim to the Iron Throne." She says it almost immediately.